Hayi siphilile zengela kodwa. Siphilila kodwa kunjani kuni?
Skora nathi.
Yes, good to see you.
Yes, Mazwe, that's my elder brother. That
He told me. That's my good professor and a good brother who's looking after me here. But yes,
well, that's my elder brother from the same village.
Wow, he told me.
Everything.
Yes, he told me. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. It's so good. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let us start and let me welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You'll notice that I really don't want to waste any time because we want to give an ample time to our speaker tonight, because it's a very important brother, it's a very important son of the soil, and we support him, we are behind him, and we'll be giving him time to really take us through on the leadership and other stuff. The good things that he has addressed us before, so it's kind of understand this platform, and so it's not his first time, and we are so glad that he's so busy during this time, because as you know that he'll be telling you and he'll be telling us that in March the ILO will be making all the announcements and the pronouncements, but he's traveling like mad. And actually I'm so humbled that he availed himself to, just to talk to us before the big day. Because can you imagine, and we pray that it will happen. We pray that it will happen, that Prof Mthunzi, the ILO Director General, and we'll be saying, yes, he spoke to us on the eve of just before he was announced, and he spoke to us, he addressed us. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. I see that others are still on their way, but we will start so that we give Prof Mthunzi, as I've said, enough time. Welcome to our members, to our regulars. Thank you so much once again for coming here. It's a leadership conversation. We learn each and every week. We are here. We are here to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn, and we address different topics that pertain to leadership. And a special welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. If you are here for the very first time, thank you for joining us, and welcome. And please do participate. We want to hear your views. Don't hold back. Don't say, no, it's my first time. Ask questions, engage the speaker, engage each other, because we want to hear from you, and we want to learn from you as well. So the speaker tonight, as I'm saying that, I'll really like to give him more time. He has been traveling a lot. He's just told us that he's now in Botswana, and I'll ask him to take us through what he's doing there, because a few days ago he was in Geneva. He was everywhere. He has been traveling like mad as he's preparing for this big position that he is interviewing for, to be the Director General of the International Labour Organization, ILO. Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba is the candidate for the ILO DG position. He is the chairman of Productivity South Africa. As I'm saying that, yes, he has really addressed us here before. Those who were here before, I did say that he's my brother, he's my mentor. He's my former boss. We used to work together at Busa, and really I learned so much from him. In a special entrepreneurship is concerned, and actually inspired me so much, because I tell people that after Busa, I started my own little thing. These are people who inspired me, and since then I've never looked back. Till today, I'm scraping on my own. And thank you so much, Prof Mdwaba, my brother. Thank you. I'm not going to waste any time. I'd really like to give it to you. The people who are here, they want to hear from you. They are here for you. Just to say that we are behind you, my brother. We support you. We pray for you. and we know that you are going to get this position because you deserve it, because you are competent. We know you, and because we know that should you get this position, or when you get this position, not if, but when you get this position, it will really impact and be beneficial to everyone globally, international, all the countries and all the members of the International Labour Organization. So tonight, you will tell us about your thoughts, about your vision, about your strategy, about the thought leadership for a new world in the workplace. And as you do that, obviously, you will be taking us through as well on the process in terms of how far you are and what is going on. My brother Zola will be handling the chat room. Brother Zola Zuzan, yes, he'll be handling the chat room. So please welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Please do participate because the speaker is here for you. Over to you, Professor Mdwaba. Over to you, my brother. You can address us now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof Mazwe. I'm really humbled to speak to you again. It's a great honor that you've invited me to chat to you again. I had to find the right position in this room because I've never worked in this room before. I did check whether you can see me. Apparently everybody says it's okay. I think the honor is particularly more because I must just tell you that, you know, it's very rare that you find two people from the same village on the same important call like this, with many important colleagues like you connected. Professor Zide, Gordon Zide is an elderly brother from my part of the world. And as the crow flies, his home is probably, I think, less than maybe a kilometer, maybe as the crow flies. so, you know, I'm really, really honored. I haven't seen him for a while, and it's thanks to you, Mazwe, that you connected us. I'm also honored, colleagues, to be able to talk to you. And as Mazwe says, I'm in Botswana right now. I'm at an ARLAC meeting in Botswana. It's a pity I can't show you the room because then it means I've got to turn around the computer. But I tried to have the flags behind me, but I didn't like the light and the air conditioning. I thought was going to make me sick by the time I'm done. It's blowing too much there. But I'm here because the African ministers of labor that are responsible for infrastructure development and technical cooperation are here. And obviously what I'm doing now is lobbying and campaigning, and I'll explain about that in a second. I'm also honored when you mentioned, Mazwe, prayer, that you are all praying, because about 2 hours ago, I was talking to colleagues colleagues and I, in chatting, we were saying, I have never, okay, maybe I've just never been exposed to so many people before. I've never seen and heard so many people praying for me. It's really humbling. It's crazy, actually. My PA in the office showed me something, I think, on one of the social media platforms where there were 16,000 responses. I was like quite shocked that 16,000 responses and all of them are praying. So I think that on its own tells me that this is a position that is definitely going to happen. I like to quote Victor Hugo when he says, no army can fight an idea whose time has come. And this idea has come. Everybody gets a 10. I think it's our 10. I think it's my 10. So we have every intention of making it happen. I do also want to underline what Professor Mazwe is saying when you said that it is through competence that I'm going to be appointed. I did ask Professor Mazwe to circulate the link for my interview in Geneva, which happened on the 20th of January. All 5 candidates for this position for the ILO Director General were interviewed. If you have not seen that link, I suggest you have a look at it. because it will give you a better context and a better understanding of what it is I'm going to talk to you about. I don't have time to get into everything, all the integrities and the nuts and bolts of what it is we do, but I'm certainly going to try and give you a status of where we are so that you know where things are, you know where things are going. And then what we will do is then talk a little bit about leadership, provocative kind of statements, so that we have a chance to have a little bit of an interactive session. So when you see that link, you would see that in the last 5 minutes, after having had 16 questions, I had 4 questions from the employers of the world. I had 4 questions from the trade unions of the world. I had 8 questions from the governments from all 5 regions that we cover. And this was at the public dialogue where the whole world was watching. And at the end of the interview, one of the things I do mention is that whilst there has never been an African in this position since the International Labour Organization was born in 1919, and certainly there's never been an employer as well, there's never been a business person, there's never been an African. Whilst this may be true, I said to them, it is a pure coincidence of life that I am African, as patriotic as I am about being South African and African. I do not want them to elect me because I'm African. I want them to elect me because I'm the most competent, the most experienced, and the one who has the highest level of expertise. And I really believe this very humbly from the bottom of my heart. The experience I have in the ILO is probably higher than most. And I was fortunate to have come in at a much younger age into the ILO. So when I agreed with Mazwe that the topic should be ILO's thought leadership for a new world in the workplace, I said to Mazwe, it's an opportunity, Mazwe, for your audience and your followers and your fellow colleagues who got a little bit of an appetizer from the last conversation we had, really without dwelling too much on what it's about, to just get into what the ILO is and what this is all about. What's the fuss? What's the fuss about? So firstly, between now and the 25th of March, the 25th of March is the day of the election in Geneva. There's a lot of travel, as Mazwe has been saying. I'm traveling to many countries where I'm confirming some of the votes. I am asking for support from some of the countries in the regions. And some countries just want you to go because they want you to come. Before they give you a vote, they want you to come and pay your respects. So I'm doing that and traveling quite a bit. But I think it's important for you to know that we've got about just under 6 weeks to go to get to the 25th of March. We're going to have another round of interviews on the 14th of March, but this will be purely by the governing body of the ILO. The governing body of the ILO is made up of 122 countries, or rather members of the governing body, which is trade unions, governments, and employers. And this 122 is made up of, the 56 who are the voters. There's 56 voters on the 25th of March. The other 66 would only come in if the 56, for some reason, somebody or some people in the 56 are unavailable. The 56, the way it's broken down is 28 votes are the governments, 14 votes is employer organizations, and 14 votes is trade unions. To win, I need 50% plus 1. I need 29 votes. In the history of the ILO, it's never happened that you win in the first round. There's normally 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds. I'm told that the record was 17 votes 10, 12 years ago by the current DG when he got 17 votes in the first round. And then he finally got 29 votes in the 6th round. So the way it works is that the one with the least votes exits every round until you get to the point. The view I have with my team after many scenarios and checking and whatever, although I don't want to say too much on the call, even though I trust all of you, but there could be 1 or 2 people who've been sent to listen. So I don't want to say more than I have to say. I just have to say that I am fairly confident that we're going to win. I'm fairly confident that we will win. In fact, I feel it and I see it. It's quite amazing. I feel it and see it that we're going to win. And the members, country members of the ILO, I think just before I go now to what it does, are 187 member states, South Africa included. And of course, it is the only organization in the world that works on a tripartite structure, that works on governments, trade unions, and employers. All other structures within the UN, some of them based in New York, the decision makers at all times are governments. This one has the three. Hence, if you look at my campaign and you look at my vision document, you would see that the central symbology for my vision is the three-legged pot that I've always argued in the ILO is what we use in our rural villages, particularly for very important meals, which I refer to as ancestral meals and so on. So what is the ILO? The ILO, very simply, is the mother of the workplace. It is the mother of the workplace because what we don't realize is that without the ILO, we would not have the body of legislation and the body of laws that we have for our human resources management. We wouldn't have, for example, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act in South Africa or similar bodies of law in other parts of the world, in all the 187 countries, basically. Without the ILO, you would not have things like freedom of association. I think we take it for granted. But when you talk about freedom of association, you know, which includes the right to protest, the right to get together, mobilize, organize, that's Convention 87 of the ILO. When you talk about collective bargaining as trade unions, that's Convention 98 of the ILO. When you talk about occupational safety and health, and I want to come back to that, you're talking Conventions 155 and 161. When you talk minimum wage dispensation that South Africa was busy with for a very long time until about 3 years ago, you're talking Convention 131. And I could go on because these are conventions of the ILO that countries come home, go to parliament, should they be convincing, they ratify that convention, and then based on the ratification, that convention is then included in their body of laws, and then it's implemented and monitored and so on and so on. Now, the ILO celebrated 100 years of its existence in 2019. We had a centenary celebration, and out of that centenary celebration, we had a centenary declaration. It's perhaps very important to mention that 2 years prior to the centenary celebration, there was something called the global, it was a global committee really that was involved in talking about the future of work. And it was involved in preparing for how we would usher the next 100 years after we celebrated. It's important to know that our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was one of the co-chairs of the Global Future of Work Committee, and he served with me and 27 other people. There were 28 of us from all over the world. I'm advised that one of the reasons the president is upset with me, I don't have proof for this, is because he and I differed on some matters of importance at that event. I had got him appointed, but you know, something about us that I'll come back to, which is called respect. I don't think the president respected enough what it is that I represented in the ILO. I think the president, typical South Africans, we never respect each other that well. I think it was assumed that, you know, this is a young man from South Africa, he must just listen to what I have to say to him, but he did not realize that I was representing over 150 business organizations and representing over 187 countries. But as a patriot of South Africa, I had maneuvered and worked with other people to get him to chair so that South Africa could be in the spotlight. I mean, this is just a little advert on the side. In case you are wondering why I have the issues that I have, I'm told. I said, I don't have proof. I'm told he's upset. Thulas Nxesi, of course, the Minister of Labor, is just an unfortunate human being. And I'm sorry that he is so unfortunate. We bumped into each other on the plane coming here to Botswana. You should have seen his face when I greeted him. He was so shocked that I was on the plane. But it's because when you disagree with some people, they take themselves too seriously. They don't look at the content of your disagreement. Now, Professor Zide will tell you, I come from a family of very strong women, very strong aunts, my mother and my sisters. And one of my aunts, Olega, likes to say, Tunzi, you always go for the ball, never go for the man, never kick the man. But if the man decides he's attached to the ball, then it's unfortunate. You're going to kick the ball and the man is going to have to see what the man has to do, right? And unfortunately, this is what it is. When you tell the truth, people get upset. And I'm coming back to that as well as part of what the ILO needs to do, I think, in this new world we are talking about. But ultimately, when we got to the celebration, and I would suggest, when you have a moment, go and have a look at this Centenary Declaration document. It's not a big document. It has, I think, about 5 pages, if I remember. It will have an attachment to it, which is a resolution that related to occupational safety and health. But it's not a long document. It's a worthy document to read if you are interested in the new world of work. If you're interested in how things should work for us to reach an optimal point, I think read it. You would see from it, I'll take you through some very important milestones of this document. You'll see that it recaps everything that you've seen basically before in the Social Justice Declaration, in the Philadelphia Declaration, in all the declarations of the past that we've read about in history. It sort of repeats some of the in the preamble, it repeats part of this. But then it goes and it addresses issues of productivity. Productivity in this document is mentioned 11 times, as I recall. It was part of my mandate as leader of the employers of the world to make sure that we got productivity in that. Productivity before had been like a swear word in the ILO. You couldn't talk about productivity because trade unions would get upset. Because when you talk about productivity, trade unions in the past have tended to think that you are only talking about labor productivity, that you are talking about the cost only, which is not it. You are talking here about total factor productivity that includes every element that goes into productivity and production lines, right? And so we also in the same document talked a lot about skills because we felt that the ILO was losing the connection between the employment creation and ensuring that people have decent work and dignity and skilling. And we felt that the OECD was getting a lot stronger in this area in productivity and skilling, and the OECD only serves a few countries, and the ILO has 187 countries. So we felt that it was important. The ILO also has a university called the Turin Center in Torino, where I chaired the employers program as well. So I've always been involved in education, by the way. Education has always been my thing. Skills has always been my thing. And even when I chaired the University of the Western Cape, it was because of my experience in education, skills, and technology as a background. And the businesses that I built, one of the businesses I built in 27 countries was a training solutions provider for very high technical skills, you know, in technology and so on. So we had skills, then we talked about the role of the private sector and the creation of employment. So these 3 areas would be very key areas you would find in the Centenary Declaration, and that's why I'm recommending have a look at it. The other document that was finalized in 2019 at the Centenary celebration is what we refer to as Convention 190, which goes together with Recommendation 206. Now, the ILO has 190 conventions. That was the last convention that we adopted in 2019. It relates to violence and harassment. The country, as we speak, has just ratified Convention 190 and will be integrating violence and harassment in our law going forward. And I know quite a few other countries that are busy with the ratification so that they can implement the Convention 190. I mention this because it's going to be very important as we move forward, because what kind of a world would we be talking about if we don't talk about a world that is against and does something about violence, against and does something about harassment of all kinds, irrespective as to what it is, whether it's violence and harassment against young people, violence and harassment against women, which is very prolific, violence and harassment against lesbians, gay people, irrespective of what class it is, we couldn't possibly have a workplace and a world that we're proud of that still has these elements. So these are the things we must deal with. And talking about this, you cannot do it without mentioning occupational safety and health. Now, I mentioned to you that occupational safety and health derives from Conventions 155 and 161. And these two, for me, are very important, particularly in a world that comes out of the COVID. A lot of you will have seen that there is a huge prevalence of recognition, and I'm calling it very deliberately, prevalence of recognition as opposed to the existence of mental health problems. Because mental health challenges have pre-existed the COVID. Like many wrongs and flaws in the socioeconomic structures that we have, we've always had flaws, but we've never had the bravery to deal with them, or rather the commitment to deal with them, or the political will to deal with them. So when you talk about issues of mental health, it is only now that people can talk openly about it and be able to say, I have issues of mental health, without you being judged and being seen to be weak. You will know in the past that as soon as you talk about mental health, it was associated by stigmatization. It was associated with, you are crazy, you are mad, or you are weak. What's wrong with you? You need a beating if you're a child. How dare you talk about an issue relating to mental health? But actually people are getting freer now. And for me, I would put the case and say, you are a brave person when you are able to say, I am having a mental health issue. And particularly if you've been watching sport, because I follow sport a lot, you would have seen, for example, that one of the key examples of this is Naomi Osaka, who plays tennis, who refused to have a media conference about 2 years ago because she wasn't happy with it. She refused very recently to play because she had mental issues. There was the lady, the gymnast from the US, Giles, who is the most decorated gymnast, but who refused to participate at the last Olympics because she was having mental health issues. And the world is getting readier and readier for it. And for me, when I become the DG in the ILO, my intention is to use these examples, is to use these sports people to work with, because you can imagine that if a sports person who's a celebrity is unable to have remedies and have the recognition of their condition, you can imagine the small, or rather what we regard as small people, and whereas there are no small people in the world, but the people who are below certain levels in society, and society see them as such, do not have access to this kind of platforms where they can be able to say, hey, we need representativity. And the trade unions are also getting weaker and weaker. So unfortunately, they don't have access or knowledge of their rights or anybody to represent them. So I've mentioned when I started that the whole idea about conventions of the ILO, the normative systems in the ILO, is that it is the fabric and the core and the heartbeat of the ILO, and indeed the heartbeat of every labor law everywhere in the world. Now, the interesting thing is that when I majored at the University of the Witwatersrand at Wits, I majored not in labor law, I majored in commercial law. I became an entertainment intellectual property law. And it was only when I got to the ILO, I mean, I did labor law as I think as an option. I can't remember what it was called, I forget the name, when it's not mandatory that you do it. And it's only when I got to the ILO that I started to appreciate what it is. Because if you think about it, and let's think about this, we spend the majority of our times working. Whether you are working in the workplace as designed, or you are working at home as we do these days. And even when you do work at home, there's a lot to think about as we go into the future. If you don't go into the office and occupy your boss or your employer's space, and you now occupy your house, your kids are around, you have some kind of unseen behavior that is not healthy for your family, because now all of a sudden your kids see you in the house, but you are in the house but not available to them. Can you imagine what that does for them mentally? That now my mom and my dad are both working at home. I see them, but they want me to shut up. I see them, but they're not going to come and help me when I need help. I see them, but they're not going to play with me. This has got new implications for the new world we're going in. How are we going to manage all this? How are we going to deal with the family life that is now being intruded upon, the intrusion that's happening? There's issues we don't think about. The water you drink, the drinks you must now get, the toilet paper you use, all the things now that you use in your house, which ordinarily would be given to you by your employer. These are the new implications as we move into the future. But we also need to look at the issues of the developing world versus the developed world. One of the things I've mentioned to a few colleagues all over the world, and I say to them, you know, informal sector, the blanket generic response by the ILO in the past has been, and the whole world has been, including the national members of the ILO, is that we must transition people from the informal sector into the formal sector. Now, that's well and good that you must transition people from the informal sector to the formal sector. But I've always known, or else always felt something is wrong with that. But I didn't know what it was until the COVID. So during the COVID, it hit me that what was wrong with that statement was that transitioning people from informality to formality has to be an imported concept, not from the developing world. It can't be from Africa, nor can it be from Latin America and countries that have a problem with, you know, informality. Because how do you propose to transition people? South Africa, for example, has a 65% informality percentage. Nigeria has about a 90%. India has about 95%. Colombia in Latin America is about 75%. Guatemala in Latin America is about 65, 70%, and so on and so on. So how do you transition people from the 95% to the 5%? How is this possible? And how do you do it in a non-patronizing fashion? How do you do it without consulting the people in informality, whether in fact this is what they want to do? Who said they want to be transitioned? Yes, we do all understand that the rationale behind why you want to transition them is issues of social protection, issues of social security, issues of having them contribute to the infrastructure maintenance and build up so that we have sustainability as we go into the future. But in reality, is it a developing country model? Is it a developing country solution? Or is it important from a developed world that actually has a theoretical appreciation of what informality is rather than a practical, pragmatic consideration? So what are we going to do with these issues of informality? What do you do in a country like South Africa, where 30 to 35% is amazingly, highly technologically advanced? The infrastructure is amazing. It participates in the JSE, companies getting listed. They, you know, productivity is high, with 65% that has no access to education, no access to water, no access to, you know, running water rather, no access to all these frills, or even understanding how to manage an SMME and keeping an SMME alive when our laws are so bureaucratic and take so long to get things done. When we talk about the future of work, which is a bit of a misnomer these days because there's no future about it, it's with us, it's been with us for a while. How are we going to take this? COVID has showed us, like I talked about working from home. It's got people to accept that actually it doesn't mean that you work from home and then you are less productive. It doesn't mean that when you work from home, you can't meet your targets, right? It doesn't mean you can't do your performance management. It's never meant that. But we needed a pandemic to force us to realize that life has changed. We all say life has changed. We all say things have changed. But there's also the realization that whilst we are all in the same storm, we are all on different boats. The boats are not the same. Some people do not survive the storm the same way. Some people don't make it through the storm. How are we going to manage this in a future that the ILO has to play a central role in as a thought leader? How would I, as a DG of the ILO, position the ILO so that the ILO is relevant? And for relevant anything, it means it must be known. Not many people know about the ILO. People assume that our laws, labor laws, flow from somewhere. We don't know, it's like the rain, maybe, you know, it rains and then you have them. They don't understand this very systematic way in which it works, that the 187 country members of the ILO will discuss discussions, and then at the International Labour Conference, which happens annually in June, you will come up with a resolution, it becomes a convention, and then it goes to the countries, they ratify, they implement, and they monitor, right? People don't realize this. Now that we do know that, and I intend to ensure that it is a very well-known organization so that when we come and speak to people, it has a meaning. You understand what it is it's supposed to do. But how do we move into a future that is hypocritical about the departments of labor, the human resources director, and ministers of labor, because it's very hypocritical. Everybody says people are the most important asset. Everybody tells you that people are the asset. Everybody brags about it. Until people have operational issues, which without even checking whether in fact it could be an operational problem that relates to a lack of productivity for whatever reasons, people assume it's people and they retrench the people. I mean, we've had the highest levels of retrenchment in the world during the COVID. South Africa, no exception, very, very high. But you'll find in most cases that those retrenchments are not people related, but people simply are the easiest to call when there is a problem. How do you face the reality that human resources directors, except for a very few companies, don't make it on the boards of companies? They're not like financial directors. They're not like commercial directors. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the fact that ministers of labor are not the most important minister? They're the custodians for people, but they're not as important as the finance director and the trade minister, the financial ministry, the treasuries, and other ministers. How do we deal with that? Because that is an attitudinal problem we need to change. How do we deal with leadership that has learned to be manipulative and that bullies? What I actually refer to as authoritarianism rather than leadership. Because for me, being in a position does not mean you're a leader, as I said the last time. It simply means you are in the position. You found yourself in the position. And because you found yourself in the position, you are so scared to lose the position. So you're scared to surround yourself with the right kind of skill and the right kind of people who are going to tell you when you're wrong. Whereas they're going to make you look good when they tell you when you're wrong. How do we change that? How do we fix a leadership that is obsessed with titles, not content, not substance? How do we fix a leadership that likes to label you in order to disable you? People label you so that they disable you. So how do you do that? How do we fix that? All of these are things that I believe the ILO needs to be involved in. Because how do you deal with people who don't know what they don't know? I mean, you talked, Professor Mazwe, when we started, that we come here to learn to unlearn. But we also come here to learn to learn. We also come here to learn. Something we've forgotten to do. We don't know how to learn. We come with preconceived ideas and we are so attached to our ideas that I may not consider that it is possible that Professor Zide knows this better than me. So when I come to the conversation with Professor Zide, I already know the outcome. How can you possibly know the outcome before you have the conversation? And how can you possibly know unless you are open to saying, hey, there's other ideas that we need to think about? So these are all the things I wanted to talk about and to say we need, for example, for South Africans, my people, we need to learn to respect each other. South Africans need to learn to respect each other. We have no respect for each other. We judge each other by the book covers. We decide that we'll respect anybody who comes from outside who looks a little bit lighter than us, except for us who come from the continent. And that for me is a problem. South Africans suffer from what I've been telling my kids these days is called pond politics. I coined this myself. You know, when you have pond political thinking, you don't realize that there's an ocean out there. And when you're in an ocean and you come from a pond, you're going to drown. You're going to drown. And you can't possibly have ocean thinking when you spend all your time in a pond. Because when you spend all your time in a pond, you believe you're a shark, when in fact you're a little, I don't know, whatever it is, right? And this, in my view, is also part of the decolonization that we need to have in all our institutions. Because the colonization process that is so intricately interwoven into who we are does not even tell us when in fact our thoughts are colonistic in their way of the way we do things, that in the way we think, in the way we do things, we are conditioned to behave in a particular way. So with those provocative statements, Professor Mazwe, I want to leave it for questions because they will help us, I think, to unpack these things a little more and for me to explain things a bit more, as opposed to everybody listening to what I have to say for the next 20 minutes that we have, because I've spoken now, I think, for about 20 minutes as well. So I think over to you, and I'm happy to elaborate on anything, Professor Mazwe.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, my brother, Prof Mdwaba. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to take your time. I'm really going to invite you now to engage the speaker. You can do that by raising your hand and we'll recognize you, or you can do that via chat room. So Prof Mdwaba is pressed with time, as you've heard that. He's in Gaborone, Botswana at the moment, in the meeting with the ministers there, the ministers of labor. So please let's engage him. Now is the time. We've got our own son of the soil who's about to make history and make us proud as a country by becoming the International Labour Organization, ILO Director General. Anyone wants to ask a question? I see a question there from my brother there from Joel Sibanda, and then he will be followed by Dr. Abdul. Let us take those two while we are waiting for others. Straight to the point, brief and short, so that we can give others space as well. My brother, Joel Sibanda.
Thank you, Prof. And also, I'd like to wish Prof Mthunzi all the best. And we pray and hope everything works out nicely for him in the new role that he's really looking forward to. What my question is, you know, the International Labour Organization came from the Industrial Revolution, which we all know the transition from how life was up until that point. And for many years now, if we look at what the Industrial Revolution sought to achieve, we're beginning probably in the last couple of centuries seeing the opposite happening. And I think instead of people becoming more rich as initially it was intended, we see a situation where people are becoming more and more poorer. Now, my question here is that, you know, in Prof Mthunzi going into this role, is he looking at reinforcing what is already there, or going in and learning to learn, as is used the word, you know, learning to learn and coming up with a totally different order in terms of the organization as it is at the moment? Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Joel. Dr. Abdul, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Prof. Mine is a principled observation. When Prof says that he would like to see a profiled labor minister, labor situation, just like a finance, I have two issues which come with that assertion. One is he's focusing on the need to maximize localized efficiencies. And secondly, it has potential for destructive competition. That's my take. Two issues: maximization of localized efficiencies and the destructive competition. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Abdul. Prof Mdwaba, may I want to respond to those two questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take another round after this. Yes, okay. Over to you.
I'm happy to. I see that there's someone else connected here with a friend by the name of Kim Heller. I've come to know her through reading her book, and I hear that she caused a lot of trouble on Radio 2000. A few days ago, my sister was telling me what was happening. I couldn't listen myself, but I do identify with some of the questions and the statements you made, Kim. I think let's start with Dr. Abdul. Dr. Abdul, I think when I give the example of a finance minister, I think it mustn't be taken literally. What I mean is that we speak with a forked tongue. So we can't speak with both sides of the mouth. You can't have a situation where you say people are the most important asset. You say people are the most important asset, right? And then having said that, you then take the custodians of people in companies, in government, everywhere, you don't give them the same prominence in the structural formation of what it is you're doing, strategic and structural, because strategy must come first. So you find, for example, that in Africa, you are lucky, and in Latin America, if the total percentage of budgets for the departments of employment and labor is more than 1.5%. That is crazy, it's ridiculous. So what are you expecting ministers of labor to do? And why is it that ministers of labor must only take the crumbs on the table when you are planning for what you're going to do for people? For me, it is from that point of view. I don't think it's not necessarily focusing on a need on localized efficiencies at all. No, very far from it. You must understand that for us to be able to operate and give credence to the ILO, the only way you can see if the ILO is successful is at national level. But the ILO can only be successful at national level, not only by doing what it's doing at the moment, which is to ratify conventions, but never implement the conventions. You know, it's one of these nice things where, as the Director General, I'm going to be one of the most photographed people when I win. You know, you get photographed for the ratification, they take the photo, they put it somewhere on the wall, and then that's the end of it. This is absolute rubbish. I'd rather not take photos. I'd rather take a photo when I know you've implemented and it's successful and it's caused impact, because we talk about sustainability, social justice, and all those things, right? And so it also links, I think, to the Jewel question where he says people are getting poorer and poorer, statement rather. You know, some of us are following the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. You would know that in the ILO, the Sustainable Development Goal that we focus on is 8, which is economic activity and decent work. It's actually decent work and economic activities, the other way around. But the 17 SDGs are meant to be working together on a partnered model. So even though we do 8, we've got owners of the others, 1, 2, 3, up to 17, right? And there is no way, though, we can succeed if we focus on 8, but without checking on our brothers and sisters in the bigger UN family on how we are doing on SDG 1 and 2. SDG 1 is poverty and SDG 2 is hunger. So if we're not dealing with the poverty one and the hunger one at 2, we're never going to succeed. And so it goes with all the other SDGs. So it's very important that we have a very aligned approach. And one of the messages that have come out of the COVID is how collaborative we must be. But of course, it's easier said than done. We're all very good at rhetoric. The most important thing is how do we work together and collaborate together in the implementation of that to make sure that we don't have a world that's getting poorer and poorer. In my view, the world is going to get poorer and poorer if we continue to use the flawed models that we are using, which have been exposed by the COVID as well, having pre-existed, as I've said, for quite a while. We need to find a way where we don't punish our people with the structures that we bring along, because they are very punishing to our people. They are not pro our people. They're not pro growth. They are not pro progress. What they do is they end up taking away the ability to create jobs. And the creation of jobs is something that the private sector and the public sector need to work together on. The ILO can't be missing in action. It's unacceptable for the ILO to be missing in action in the conversations we have for the creation of employment. If you take, for example, Professor Mazwe mentioned that I chair Productivity South Africa, and it's one of the reasons I think the Minister of Employment and Labor doesn't like me much. It's because I was appointed as the chair, I'm accountable to the minister. But the Productivity SA entity is a creation of the Employment Services Act. The rationale for its existence is that it must contribute to the creation of jobs, it must contribute to the retention of jobs, and it must contribute to competitiveness. But we've warned the government for the last 10 years that we are busy going to right at the bottom. If you look at the Global Competitiveness Index, I think I mentioned it the last time I spoke to you. South Africa is now number 62 out of 63 countries. And about 10, 11 years ago, we're number 44. So the question you should be asking is, what happened? But actually the graphs every year show you where we are going wrong and where we need to make the tweaks. So when Joel asks, am I going to be reinforcing or learning to learn or tweaking? I'm sorry to ask you to answer you this way, Joel. I'm going to be doing a little bit of everything. Okay? But mainly, I have to tweak the rich legacy of the ILO. It's got a very rich legacy, the ILO. But somebody said it's like a dusted somebody that needs to be undusted. You know, it's full of dust. We need to take the dust off and try and tweak a few things so that as we learn to learn, we also learn to bring all the people who are young into this amazing organization that people don't know much about, to ensure that we're able to deliver on impact and ensure sustainability. Professor Mazwe, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, my brother. We'll take another round. We'll start with my sister there, Pumelele Makatini, will be followed by my sister Kim Hela, and then Kim will be followed by Andre Young. In that order, please. Pumelele, Kim,
Thank you.
Andre. Thank you. Over to you, sis.
Thanks, Prof. So the first one is a statement. I really like the discussion that we've just had. And I like the term pond politics. I'm going to steal that as well because I've seen it playing out. So I was a student at Wits Business School, and in one of my master's programs, in one of my modules, when I was doing a master's program, we had a module called Global Entrepreneurship. And the professor asked how many of us had passports. And there were only less than, I think there were less than 10 people who raised their hands in a class of 45 people. And my class was full of executives and people with really high profiled titles who had never crossed the border. And I found that to be quite strange. But it's not surprising when people refer to brothers and sisters who are within our neighboring countries as people from Africa. I sometimes wonder where we are, because South Africa is in South Africa, and it's the only country whose name has Africa that is attached to it. So that's just a statement. And then my question is, you mentioned something very important about how South Africans do not respect each other. How do you think we can get to the point of thoughtful disagreements? You know, you mentioned how if you have a different school of thought from other people who are perceived to be more powerful, or you know, people who are perceived to be in positions of influence, more influence and power, they disregard you because, and I've experienced that as well. And I've often battled with the question of how does one get to a level of thoughtful disagreement with your elders, for example. And I'm mentioning these things because I became an executive at a young age. So those things have played out. And yeah, so I'd just like to pick on your brain on how do you think we can redress this issue that you've mentioned through thoughtful disagreement? Thanks.
Thank you, Pumelele. Thank you. We go to Kim Hela.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm sitting in the dark, so I'm not sure if my reception's coming out clear.
We can hear you, Kim. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm sitting in the dark, but I thought I couldn't miss the session with somebody I respect deeply, and I think is one of what I would call one of the very few revolutionary thinkers we have in the country. And I love the way so many phrases have been put through that are really thought leadership for us. But I want to ask some questions, you know, for those of us that try and speak with an alternative voice and speak truth to power, and there are too few people, what we find is that we are prejudiced and excluded, that the master narrative, and I use that word intentionally, is something that isn't shouldn't be disrupted, because if you dare to do that, you are excluded. And I think I've written in an article somewhere in my book that speaking truth to power in the new dawn is a blood sport. And I think the esteemed guest that you have tonight has had the courage to speak out. And I really respect that level of integrity. My question, I have two questions. The one is, how do we instill that kind of thinking, or not we, perhaps you as leaders, particularly to young Black people who I think have been so snuffed out by this supersized narrative of white supremacy. I mean, we see that. You speak about my interview yesterday. I was speaking about the pandemic of racism, that young Black school children are still subjected to such a vile narrative day in and day out. So how do you truly engender a confident voice amongst the youth? And secondly, perhaps this is an unrelated question, but I foresee something very bad happening in this country, which is this growing Black on Black violence. And I think we're going to go into an era where Black people are turning on Black people incredibly, even more so than ever, because there's no identification or no narrative about where the real enemies in the society vest, which is in white supremacy and this totally captured narrative. And I'd be interested with your experience and expertise and standing, how you would address that second question. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you. And then we'll take Andre, and then we'll ask Prof to respond, and we'll take another round. I see other hands. We'll come back to another round. My brother Andre Young, over to you, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Mazwe. Prof Mazwe Majola, your leadership we appreciate. If this was pre-1994, I'd be screaming to Mthunzi, Amandla! but here's my question, because Mthunzi, yes, Kim's right, you are a revolutionary. You've been a revolutionary. I hope you are an even more influential and powerful revolutionary in this new role. But disruption is our experience. It's the norm we've become comfortable with. And disruption has created less traction in the implementation of the SDGs. And we're seeing more ill health, as you said, versus well-being. We're seeing more inequality than what the SDGs call for. We're seeing a worse contribution to the world and the environment. This is my experience in South Africa. And most certainly economically, I don't have to tell you about where we are now with unemployment and where we are now with economics that create a gap further and further away from what the goals were meant to be. So here's my question. If disruption is our experience, and the linear processes we've observed in the world today, in the modernity of labor and the future of work, what revolutionary acts do you think are required that we might step into this gap that's been created to create the systemic phase change that is required? Because here's the thing, I'm hoping you're going to give some push up the hill to Mthunzi. You know, my mother used to say, winning is better today than yesterday, every day. I said it last week as well in this forum. Winning today, being better today than yesterday, every day. It appears as though we are not getting better. We're on a trajectory to worse. How do you think the ILO can contribute to a winning world, specifically with all of this disruption? And what do you think is required to step in with this systemic phase change that's required globally, especially give me some hints and hope for South Africa? Thank you.
Over to you, Prof Mdoba.
Okay, so I mean, these are very packed, pregnant questions and comments. You know, it's like you got triplets and quadruplets and all kinds of things. So let's see where we start. So I see that one of my colleagues in my campaign is connected. We're actually in the same hotel. Tahir Mayepa, who's the General Secretary of the PSCU, the Public Sector Commercial Union. He's a member of my campaign, so I see him there. And I think Tahir has some very interesting concepts about how we need to change things as well. He'll probably share with me after I'm done with this call as to what he thinks about some of the things that we are talking about here. So where do we start? So, you know, I'm intrigued by this revolutionary word, right? That I'm revolutionary. I have a little story that I have to tell you, Professor Mazwe, that is very interesting. Is that in about 2001, 2002, when I participated in a management buyout with colleagues of a company called Talk IT, which is the company that we ended up building in 27 countries, a guy by the name of Nhlanhla Goba, if somebody ever finds this guy, please tell him he needs to talk to me, because he comes to my office and my PA and makes sure he comes, because I've always had this rule that I've got to meet everybody at least once, even if I don't understand what they want from me. So at least I got to meet them once. And then if they talk things I don't understand, then I'm never meeting them again. Okay, but at least once, I need to hear what they're talking about. So Nhlanhla Goba comes to my office and starts telling me he wants to recruit me from the Black Information Technology Forum. So I said, what is that? He says, the BITF. I said, what does it do? He tells me what it does, redressing the imbalances of the past in technology, bara. So I said, oh, why are you coming to me? He says, no, because we're looking for revolutionaries. I said, you're looking for revolutionaries here in my office? He says, yeah. I said, well, I come from the rural villages of the Eastern Cape. I have no idea what you're talking about. The closest I've come to a revolution is by reading about France and Marie Antoinette and let them eat cake, and also reading in sociology, in industrial sociology about Karl Marx. But beyond that, I don't think I can do this. But anyway, so I was referred to as a revolutionary quite early on. And now it's intriguing that 20 years later, this word comes back of a revolutionary, which Kim used and Andre used. But Pumelele, I think, you know, the thing about respect and thoughtful disagreement, especially with elders, you know, and Kim also talked about prejudice that comes from this being excluded because of, you know, the master narrative. You know, I must tell you that I have died a lot of deaths in my life. I've died many deaths. I should never be around, because as soon as you are different, as soon as you tell people the truth, they want to kill you. They want to destroy you. And the funny thing is, you want to be destroyed by the people you think are your friends around you. And they distance themselves from you as soon as, then they label you. That's why I said labeling is disabling. Then you are referred to as a reactionary. They said, oh, he's a reactionary, that guy. So what is a reactionary? He's a guy who behaves like you, Haibo, you know, and then you become arrogant. Then you are referred to all these things just because you're a confident person who's determined to tell the truth and live by it, okay? Now, unfortunately, every pioneering spirit gets the whiplashes for it. Everybody who breaks ranks gets punished a bit. Unfortunately, that's how it is. The only thing, though, is the consistency with which we do it. If you are resolute and determined, finally, people get it. I mean, I sent a very interesting video clip to Mazwe that he laughed about before we started, because I was on the same flight with Minister Nglesi last night coming here, and it was very funny that he was so shocked to see me on the flight, because he's been avoiding me and talking via radio and TV. But now we're in the same hotel here, so he can't even walk on the same corridor as me, you know, because the truth shall set you free, you see. And the reason I mention this is because the reality of it is that we participate in it. And how do we participate in it? We participate in what I've referred to before, maybe on this platform and on others, as dietyship. You know, dietyship is the creation of gods. We like to create gods in the people that take positions. As soon as they have an authoritative position, we change even our tone. It's like, comrade minister, chief leader. And then, what do you mean chief leader? What has he led before? I mean, and they end up thinking that they are the chosen ones, because we make them feel like chosen ones. All of a sudden, we apologize for raising points. I'm sorry, minister, but you know, why are you sorry? You shouldn't be sorry. It's a fact. Raise the issue. and raise it with confidence and be firm about it, right? And when people are talking nonsense, tell them they're talking nonsense. That is why, as I'm talking to you here, Andre, I'm not supported by the South African government. This is odd. 187 members of the ILO, but I've had to fund my own campaign. Since May 2020, I'm funding from my cash, and in the last 5 months, from donations that I get from people to travel to and fro and from. Why? Because you tell the truth. Why? Because you do not want to be sucked into lies. You don't want to be sucked into an environment where you can't identify who you are when you go to bed. And some of us like to sleep well at night, right? And to sleep well at night, it means I must be different. So when you are resolute and determined, you have the situation that's happening now, where all the people they are working with are very desperate because I'm going to win on the 25th of March. And when I win on the 25th of March, I tell you there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems because your leverage that you would have had if you'd handled it differently is gone. The master narrative is effed. Excuse my use of that expletive, right? It's completely gone. You can't leverage it. I'm free. So in some way, when people do that to you, they free you, they liberate you. In some way, when they don't want to associate with you, they give you space to think. They give you space to meditate. They give you space to come up with your ideas free from encumbrances. Nobody's going to take you prisoner. You can do your own thing. Is it painful? Yes, but I was taught. Another thing I was taught by having very beautiful aunts who are very beauty conscious, but very strong women, and they'll smack you to smithereens, is that pain is a necessary part of beauty. Pain is a necessary part of beauty. There ain't no beauty with no pain. That's for sure. So if you believe it and not just say it, like some people who've got half faith, they believe, they tell you one thing today about faith, the next day they tell you something else that demonstrates they have no faith, okay? So it is very important to have faith and you believe and have confidence. It's very, very important. So when you honor an alternative voice, Kim, it's important for you to continue, but it's important for you also to find a network with other individuals who increasingly are trying to find their voice and are realizing and are looking for inspiration. You are an inspiration. All of you are inspirations that speak your mind, but you just don't have anybody tell you at home because, you know, at home, we're not learned to compliment each other. Otherwise, people think you're going to think you're important, you know, so they mustn't compliment you. They compliment somebody who comes from outside, but not you. They can't tell you you're great. You're a great human being. All of us on this call are great human beings. We offer different competencies, different talents. But we allow people to mess with our minds. We allow people to give us corrosion and toxicity. And then we're not so sure by the time we go to bed. You think, oh, maybe I messed up. No, there's no messing up. You're okay. But you're surrounded by a mess. That's the problem. I will tell you, for example, that one day I made the mistake of telling President Zuma that he's making a mistake with entrepreneurship and enterprise development after I was asked to convene Black people, business people at the convention center. This is about 12, 13 years ago. And I made the mistake of telling him that the ANC, of which I was a member, still am, by the way, even though I don't know where my card is. For 5 years, I've been asking for it. But the point is, when I raised the issue that we're making mistakes, that we are eroding the people's liberation, that we are eroding everything that is good, I was told that I disrespected the president and that I was pointing at him on the podium. I became persona non grata. I got no deals in South Africa. That's when I left and spent a lot of my time in Geneva at the ILO, right? My own friends avoided me because it was not good to be associated with me, the reactionary, or rather people that I thought were my friends. I don't think they were my friends now. And all of a sudden now they're coming out of their, I don't know, corners and remembering that I was once their friend just because I might be the DG of the ILO. This is the fakeness we deal with. That's the fakeness we deal with. When people are supposed to be there, when it matters, they disappear. When you're supposed to say things, they hide. And when you're supposed to work with them, they stab you in the back. But ultimately, when they see you in the light, because you stay in the light, they want to associate with you again. I mean, it's like a funny thing about human being and human nature. So for me, I say we need to stop this dietyship, this creating gods and taking people and putting up on their pedestal. No matter what position you get to, if you're Mtunzi, you're Mtunzi. I don't want me to be known as anything else but Mthunzi, quite frankly. I don't want to be known as anything else but as a result of my performance and my implementation and what I do, not by title. Title is useless. Title is empty. And yes, it's understandable, Phumelele, when you are young and you get into these places young, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you're a Black woman, oh my God, then it's packed against you, right? It's complicated, but you need to find people that are going to identify with you. You need to find people that are going to understand that as busy as we might be, we need to make time. Now, this is the other thing about busyness that I tell everybody. I think I'm a little bit busy. I think I'm busier, Prof Mazwe, than the average person. But I have friends who tell me every day, who thank me for responding and returning a call or returning a message, who tell me that people don't return messages, so they must thank me for returning a message, which I find upset, because all of us make time for the things that are important to us, right? All of us make time for things we want. We prioritize. No one is busy enough. They just refuse to make time for you. That's all. They're just telling you you're not important enough. We can all make time. How much time is debatable, but we can all make time, as busy as we might be. So at the same time, though, as we deal away with dietership, we need to talk about education. Education is always important. We always need to take the opportunity to educate people in the nicest, humblest possible way in every walk of life. Because it is possible to do that in a non-patronizing way, to share and not be angry when people question us or people disagree with us. We need to give examples, rich examples of success. The examples we have of our successes, we need to be proud of them and share them widely. When you talk about SDGs, though, Andre, at the same time, I also need to say to you that, you know, SDGs are also a factor of funding. I don't know if I said it on this platform last time, but I must say it now to you, that SDGs in the last few years or so, the last 12 months, we've had about 50 to 100 billion funding for SDGs in Africa per annum, 50 to 100 billion per year. But the reality is that nobody wants to give money to Africa. For us to be able to meet the goals, we need at least $1 trillion a year, $1 trillion to meet the goals. We were never going to meet the goals before the COVID. We ain't not meeting the goals for sure now because of the COVID, that's for sure. But we're not meeting them before, right? So we also need to have that reality. As we talk about all these things, issues of the climate, the environment, you know, countries like the Barbados and little Caribbean islands that are disappearing because of the lack of respect we have for the climate and the environment, we need to be aware that we are all connected in the world, right? And for us, we need to believe in the thinking we have and believe in who we are for us to continue bringing light to the world. Somebody a few months ago who was doing at a spa, a lady was doing my manicure and said the most profound thing. She said to me, Budi, you know what is the problem with most of us? I said, what is the problem, sis? He says, because when you hold a candle, we want to blow it out. We don't realize that we just need to bring multiple candles and we shall all have light. But we blow out the one candle. This is nonsense. It's absurd. So we need to change that kind of thinking. So it's all attitudinal. Most of the challenges we have in today's world are attitudinal. We have the biggest challenge the world has ever known is right now. Whether it's colonization, whether it's chauvinism, whether it's violent behavior, whether it's not liking each other because I'm gay and I'm lesbian, whether all these things are a mess up in the mind. It's just it's a mind thing. So if we don't change those attitudes, and when we are talking about winning is better today than yesterday, every day, it's almost like you're talking about Kaizen, which is about, you know, every day needs to be a better day. We need to improve every day. Every day needs progress. And who doesn't want that? We all want to be winners. But at the same time, we don't want to lift each other and work like teams. To win, we need to work like teams because not all of us are good or great in the same areas. We don't all have the same competence. We can't. It's not possible. We're not designed like that as a world, right? For us to be constructively disruptive, we need to be strategic interconnected and leverage each other. Mazwe, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, brother. Thank you very much. We'll take the last round now, ladies and gentlemen. I see a hand there from Tibelo, my sister there, Tibelo, and she'll be followed by my other sister, Wezi Koza. I saw other hands, but I think they've lowered their hands. That was Busisiwe Sibisi and Pumzeles Mia. I believe maybe their questions were addressed because they lowered their hands. So this is the last round now, ladies and gentlemen. So it will be Tibelo, and then it will be Wezi. I see another one, Sipiwe Mngadi, in that order, please. And then Prof Mthunzi will respond. By the way, Nhlanhla Goba, Andre Young will connect with Nhlanhla Goba if we still have to meet him. But for now, let's take these three hands, and then Mthunzi will respond. Over to you, Sister Tibelo.
Prof, thank you very much. Good evening to all the esteemed leaders that are here on the call, and for what an awesome presentation that we've had from Professor. Having worked in HR, I laughed. I thought to myself, it's the first time that I understand what the ILO does, which just confirms how little we know about the role of the ILO and its impact on human resources. But on a lighter note, Prof, you indicated that the outgoing leader had been in that position for 17 years. And I'm saying to myself, we're always saying that people shouldn't sit in leadership positions, for extended periods. So what could have been the reasons for him, I'm assuming that it's a he, for him to have been in that position for that period? And will you be there for another 17 years? Thank you.
Thanks, Tibelo.
If I may, Mazwe, sorry to interrupt. It's actually 10 years. It's 10 years, not 17. It's 2 terms of 5 years. In the multilateral environment in the United Nations, it sort of happens like that. But I'll answer the question about how long I'll be there when I come back, once you've given the other colleague an opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Sis Wezi, and then we'll be followed by Spiwe. Yes, sis.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you very much for a lovely and brilliant rendition from Professor Mthunzi, and good evening, everybody. The question I have is very simple and easy, short. South Africa is known to be a very unfriendly country in as far as investors are concerned. What is your take on it, especially in our current depressed economy? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Siswezi. And over to Mr. Mngadi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Prof Majola. I have a very simple question for the incoming DG. I just want to know what is his vision in reference to South Africa, considering that we've got a dysfunctional workers' federation and service delivery is not also taking place, and there's high levels of unemployment. And lastly, just a comment, after you finish your term as DG, please come and lead the ANC. We will support you because you are one of the leaders who are speaking truth to power, and I'm highly inspired by your resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mngadi. Over to you, Prof. Mdwaba.
Thank you, Mazwe. I appreciate really also the feedback that I'm getting, colleagues, and the good wishes. I really, really appreciate the support. I think, Tibelo, I'm happy that you now know the ILO a bit more. It is actually one of my, when you listen to the link, if you have time to go into the link of my interview of the 20th of January in the ILO, you would see that when I opened the first introduction, because we had to do an introduction, at least I think for 5 minutes before we go into the questions, was to say, I want to see an ILO that is known. For it to be relevant, it needs to be known. We need to demystify it, need to unpack it. And maybe I should just mention that I am writing 2 books concurrently. And a week ago, I decided maybe I need to finish the other book before I become DG. So hopefully I'll finish the book before I become DG. I'll try very hard in between the flights and the hotels and whatever you to maybe write that. And hopefully you'll understand the ILO even better with that book, because I would want it to be at least in about 11 languages internationally, including some of our own here at home. Now, in terms of how long I intend to be there. So it's 2 terms of 5 years. Which is why I would have to move to Switzerland as of the 1st of April. But my plan and intention, which my teams find it difficult to swallow, is to be there for 5 years, not 10. So the question people ask is why? I say, well, I want to be there for 5 years because I want to cause as much constructive disruption as I possibly can. And then I don't want to be held prisoner by this, what I see every leader struggling with, that as I come into office, I'm already working on my 2nd term. So as a result, I do nothing because I want to make sure I'm popular for the 2nd term. So I don't want to be held prison by this. I want to go in, do what I have to do in 5 years. If I'm asked to stay because people now understand and are happy with what I'm doing, then I'll consider it. But my plan is just 5 years. But the current guy, as I said, has spent 10 years, so he's served 2 terms. In terms of South Africa being unfriendly, so, I also chair the South African Norwegian Association, which tries to bring business to South Africa from Norway and vice versa, from, building bridges and really investments between the 2 countries. The thing that has come out of all these conversations is our self-importance of South Africa is one of the problems. And by self-importance, I mean, we really, really take ourselves too seriously. We become very unavailable and we become inaccessible. So we hide behind PAs who hide behind PAs. And when people try to get hold of us, they can't find us because, we believe this is the thing and we like to be known to be busy, busy is a sport. Busy is a very big thing for other people. How they derive importance in society is by constantly being busy. They think it's a fashionable thing to say, oh, I'm busy. So what does it mean when you're busy? Why don't you prioritize and do the things you're supposed to do? So those for me are the reasons. And also though, I think we also fail to highlight the beauty of who we are, because we're a country that has, in spite of our failure to implement, our failure to monitor the laws, we're still a country that respects rights. We're still amongst the highest in terms of rights. We've got entrenched rights. We've got one of the best constitutions in the world. We have a lot going for us, is that people still believe in us even when we make a mess. People still are hopeful that one day we're going to wake up and we're going to realize and smell the coffee. We have a lot going for us in terms of having institutions that still work. Yes, they're being eroded. We are looting them, but they still work. We have a lot, I think, of good universities, lots of good research happening in our country. There's a lot of things we could do better, and we have good people. The whole world thinks we're amazing. The whole world thinks we're amazing, except for us. We're the only ones who don't think we're amazing. South Africans don't think South Africans are amazing, but everyone else thinks we're the best, right? Ethically, our work ethic, the things we do. So those are the things I think we need to do better on. In terms of my vision in South Africa, well, my vision is to build an ILO that cares and an ILO that delivers. And an ILO that cares and an ILO that delivers is one that is able to collaborate with its brothers and sisters in the United Nations multilateral environment, the WTO, the World Trade Organization that has Dr. Ngozi now as a leader, the World Health Organization that has been thrust into the spotlight because of the COVID, Dr. Tedros, and all the other brothers and sisters that we have in the UN family. Remember that the ILO is older than the UN. I think it's important for you to know this. ILO was born in 1919 as a result of the First World War. The UN was born in 1945 as a result of the Second World War. It is through a collaboration agreement in 1946 that the ILO is part of the UN family, but has a completely different way of running, completely different governance that is driven by the tripartite, the constituents, right? Now, in building an ILO that is collaborative, but you also want to build an ILO that cares, because you need to show its people that work for the ILO that they are important, that you do things for them as you do for the outside world. And in doing that, you need to attend, of course, to your 187 members. South Africa is one of them. South Africa is one of the founder members of the ILO. Some of you may not be pleased to learn that actually the person who got us to join the ILO and got us to join the United Nations is one little known guy called Jan Smuts. He was the guy who failed here with dealing with race issues in the National Party, but somehow very intriguing, he got to know about the ILO and the UN, and he got us to join. So one of the things I think that would have to happen with South Africa, of course, is that because we have a family squabble, and I've had to fund my way, and I still rely on donations to do this when my competitors are being funded by their countries, you know, the Australian candidate, the Togolese, the French, and the South Korean, they get millions from, you know, their governments. And I think I'll be failing my campaign if I don't say, by the way, you can also donate to us. Mazwe can give you the link to our website. We welcome donations. So the first thing we would have to do is to make peace. I think, you know, because we're a family and we have a squabble, I think we need to find a way for people to come and slaughter and do whatever needs to happen so that I can come home and have good conversations at home, you know, although the party will not be in South Africa, the party will be somewhere else. It will be in Swaziland and Malawi and Lesotho, all these countries that have looked out for me in SADC. The party will be there, but once the party is happening there and in Nigeria and all these countries that are supporting me, hey, we can slaughter in South Africa and appease the ancestors and make sure that all of us are happy. And then I can contribute to what I think we can do in South Africa, because there's a lot I think we can contribute in South Africa, in my view, and the whole continent, really. Thank you, Mazwe.
Wow, thank you very much, my brother. Thank you so much. We've really, you've really empowered us again today, as you always do, and you inspired us, as I've said in my opening remarks, that we support you all the way. We are behind you, and we know that you're going to make it. And the people who are here, very influential people from all walks of life. On behalf of them, we want to wish you all the best. We are proud of you being a South African, and we are proud of you being the son of the soul, that you're really going out there to represent our country. Now, there's some information there that Prof Mthunzi is posting on the chat. Please check, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we are coming to the close. We obviously, this is a very hot, this is a very wonderful session. And I would like to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending it. Thank you so much to those who, our regulars and our members who attend every Wednesdays, and to those who are here for the first time, also thank you for joining us. Now you'll understand, as I always say, what makes us to meet every Wednesdays, because there's not a day where we've ever been failed by a speaker that we bring here, because we always bring powerful speakers. And as I always say, the majority of the people you see here are our past speakers and our past panelists. So you come, listen to another person, you come, address us, and also come back whenever it's possible for you to do. So we wish you all the best, Prof Ndwaba, and obviously we will keep tracking and keep following you as to what is happening. We look forward for that big day on the 25th of March. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll meet again next week, Wednesday. Please do join us for another wonderful and powerful session, as we always do. We believe that leadership, it's a journey. We need to empower each other. There's not a time when you can say you have arrived. So we meet here as scholars, as academics, as leaders from all walks of life, just to sharpen each other and to empower one another. This is a safe space. Whatever we say and whatever we do here, it's just for us as members of this session. So thank you so much. The session is adjourned now until we meet again next week, Wednesday. And may God bless you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Mazwe.